So, how many of you guys are introverts? Oh, how many of you know what an introvert is? Okay, so there's only 3 out here. Well, I am an introvert. And so being up in front of people is not something that when I was in high school I would have done gladly or at all. But when God starts working on you, then for me this is like the only place that I don't know, it's easier now to get up in front of a bunch of people that I don't know. Is there anyone in here I do know? Are there Rashags in the house? No? Okay. Yeah, where? Daniel! So I taught Daniel he was in 3rd grade. And every day, if by 9 a.m. he had not said, "Miss Morrison, you're weird," then I had to do something to make up for that. Like, I don't know why, but I just remember one day I finally got them. They're all doing their homework, because I have ADD, and so when you're working with like little kids, and I was only, what, 20? I don't know how they let me teach you. Are you doing okay? Like, in school? Okay, well, I'm really sorry if you're not. It was just 3rd grade. Couldn't mess up that bad. But I remember they were all like around our little classroom, and they were all diligently doing their schoolwork. And so I was like, yes, I have time to grade. And I was sitting there, and then I got done, and they're still doing their schoolwork. And I was like started to get a little bored, and for some reason I had popsicle sticks on my desk. Do you remember this? No? I put them in my lip, like fangs, and I just sat there staring at them to see how long it would take them to notice. Do you remember that? Oh yeah, we had good times. And then the other time, I just remember we had a cracker whistling contest. Do you remember that? Like, they didn't know what it was. But you know when you like race and you put crackers in your mouth and you see who can whistle first? Have you never done that? Okay, so do it tonight when you get home. But not, well, maybe on the carpet it's easier to vacuum. But like, you know, it takes a little bit to soak in the crackers, so you're like spraying crumbs everywhere, and it's awesome. Okay, anyways, yeah, so that had nothing to do with anything, but it was fun. So I'm just going to share a little bit with you this morning about how God has just ripped my life apart and made it awesome. I graduated from Andrews in the theology department in 2008. Well, technically 2007. I left at Christmas, but anyways, and when I was here, you know, I was dating this guy. He's not the one I'm married to, but we were engaged at the time. And here, this is just like to give you some background. Okay, there's 6 kids in my family. I'm number 2. I have an older brother, and so I'm like the number 1, the oldest daughter. And there's a big gap. So there's like the older 3, and then we call them the little kids, even though they're all taller than me now. But there's the big kids and the little kids, and that's just how it goes. Okay, so my older brother, he's 2 years older than me, and then I'm 2 years older than Alyssa. And when we were growing up, we lived in Iowa. I'll never admit that past today. Okay, just so you know. And we had this old farmhouse, and my parents are very different than they are now. My dad was in construction. My mom stayed at home with us, and there was just the 3 of us, and my dad worked all the time, and I wouldn't see him that often. My older brother went to work with him all the time, and I stayed home with my mom. I don't know. Anyways, since high school, when I went in 9th grade, my dad became a lay pastor. So we went from like, you know, I grew up, my parents fought all the time. I'd go to bed crying, thinking my parents were going to get a divorce. And then in high school, my dad was a pastor, so a little bit different. And so I always tell the little kids, that they have a much different family than we did, because they were like, how come you got to this when you were little? And I was like, we do not even have the same parents. So, I mean, we do, but it can confuse them a little bit. They're in high school, so they know better. But anyways, so, you know, just having that background, okay? So fast forward. I'm in college, I'm engaged, and I'm trying to plan a wedding, long distance, because he was, in South Carolina, and I'm here planning. And for just the person that I was at that time, I grew up not wanting to do girly things. Okay, like, I didn't like wearing dresses or skirts. I don't know if you guys are like that. Well, you guys, yeah. They're not comfortable. Be glad we're not back in the day where they wore those robes, or Greek times. Because the shorter the skirt, I think that meant you were more wealthy or something. So let's keep those down below the knees. Okay. So, anyways, I didn't like skirts. I didn't like a lot of girly type things. And so planning a wedding, that's kind of that's the girls' thing to plan. Guys, you can just sit there, give your input, but it won't really matter. And by the way, my husband, when we got married in July, so I haven't even been married a year, I'm a newbie. And he loves the color orange. Who wants orange in their wedding? That's like construction signs. No. And so he snuck it in on his shoes. He wears Puma everything, and he has shoes with a little orange Puma, and he's like, don't worry, my pant leg will cover him up. But then he wore orange socks, so in some of the pictures, his pants are up to here, and you've got orange Argyle socks, and whatever. It was his signature. It was awesome. Anyways, so back then I was trying to plan this wedding, but I hated all things girly. So I would try on wedding dresses, and they would look good, but I was like, man, there's lace on this. Do I like lace? I don't think I like lace. Or this one's got this big old bow in the back. Who likes bows? And then they were glittery. I didn't know. I was like, well, this one, it's pretty. What is me? And I didn't have any idea. It was super stressful. And picking the place and all of that stuff, I was just, whatever. So my parents lived in LaPorte, Indiana, and my dad was a pastor there. And I drove home from college, probably to do laundry or something, and I walked on the door. I was having a fine day, by the way. But my dad has this gift of discernment. That's what the Bible calls it. I call it annoying. But he will look you in the face and he'll be like, something's wrong, isn't it? And you're like, no, I'm actually, and I just started crying. And I was seriously I'm singing to the radio, driving home, I'm having a pretty good time. And then I get home and he's like, Lawren, are you okay? And I just started crying. So he's holding me, and my mom comes to the kitchen, she's like, what happened? And I'm just crying. He's like, she's having a rough day. What's wrong? And I was like, I don't even know why I'm crying. I didn't know something was wrong. And by the way, number 2, I didn't like crying. I don't like showing emotion, but for some reason my dad could just suck it out of me, even if I didn't know it was there. And so we're sitting there crying, and he's like, Lawren, we're going to pray with you. We're going to ask God why you're crying. And I was like, okay. You're the dad. So Mom's like, I'll get a paper and pencil. I was like, what have you two gotten into? So we go into the living room, and he's like, this may be a little different, but your mother and I have been learning a different type of prayer. We just want to practice it with you today. Will that be okay? And I was like, what is going on? Okay, sure. And so, I kind of composed myself. We all kneeled down on the living room floor, and my dad's like, okay, this may seem weird, but we're just going to ask for Jesus to be here. And he told me this, I don't know if you guys, in John 14, Jesus says that I am the way, the truth, and the light. Okay, so my dad pulled that verse out. And then also in Luke, I think Luke 14, Jesus says that if you were going to ask your earthly father to give you bread, would he give you a stone? Or if you're going to ask him for an egg, would he give you a scorpion? And how much more would your Father in heaven want to give good gifts to those who love him or who he loves? And so he's like, I believe that today God wants to be here with you. He wants to talk to you, and he wants to give you good gifts. And I was like, okay, that's good. I like gifts. Who doesn't? So we're kneeling on the floor, and he's like, okay, this may seem weird, but this is what I want you to do. And he's like, I've prayed like this with grown men in our church, so don't feel like it's a childish thing. but how do you not? Okay, so we're kneeling here, and he's like, hold out your hand, and I was like, okay. And my mom's like, she's all reverently bowing her head. Okay, so he's like, hold out your hand, and he said, okay, I want you to say, Jesus, take my hand. And he closes his eyes and waits for me, and I'm like looking at him, and I was like, what is wrong with you? I've never done this, but they were so serious about this, and I was like, okay, Jesus, take my hand. And I just like opened my eyes and looked at them, and they were waiting. And so my dad was like, so, did he do it? And I was like, has God ever like reached down and grabbed your hand before? No. And he's like, okay, he may not literally take your hand, but you may see it in a different way. Sorry, I'm going to kind of take up the next class a little bit. Wow, you guys are such eager students to learn. Okay, so I'm kneeling there, holding out my hand, and he's like, you know, you may not see it. Once I prayed with someone, and she just felt like God's presence was there, and she pictured him putting his arm around her, or someone else, he was, I don't know, just sitting beside her, and he was like, it's just a way of praying and asking for his presence. And so I was like, okay, and he's like, okay, so let's do it again. So I kneeled down, and I'm like, Jesus, take my hand. And I haven't been a person who, like, I grew up in the church, and I grew up knowing God's presence. Like, sometimes I would scream at him, like, I don't want you here, but I would know he was there. And so immediately I just felt, you know, Jesus is here right now. And so I turned to my dad, and I'm like, okay, we're good. And so he was like, all right, I want you to ask, just close your eyes and say out loud, Jesus, why am I crying? And I was like, oh my goodness, I just came home to do my laundry. Okay, Jesus, why am I crying? And the weirdest thought came into my head, and I didn't want to say it out loud. And he was like, what did you hear? And I was like, nothing. And he was like, you heard something, didn't you? Gift of discernment. My dad's crazy. So I was like, yeah, but it's super weird. He's like, okay, just ask again. So I'm like, what was my question? Oh yeah, why am I crying, or why was I crying? And I heard the same thing again. So my dad's like, it might be super weird. Well, let's just go with it. And I was like, okay, I heard I hate pink. And my dad started laughing, and he looked at me, he's like, do you hate pink? And my mom's like, oh, she hates pink. She tried to buy me something pink before. Didn't go well. Okay, and he started laughing, and he's like, okay, do you know why you hate pink? I was like, it's ugly. I don't know. And so we prayed again, and you know, I closed my eyes, and he said, just ask God, why do you hate pink? So I did that. Weirdest thought came into my head after that. This was just getting weirder, by the way. And I opened my eyes, and I was like, no, this is not happening. And Dad's like, what did you hear? And I was like, apparently I want to be a boy. Okay, being like 20, I think I was 23 or 24, sitting in the living room floor with God telling me that I want to be a boy, this is just like a really weird moment, okay? And my dad starts laughing again. My mom's, by the way, her pen and paper, she's writing everything I ask God and everything that I say I thought in response. So she's keeping, okay, I want to be a boy. She's writing it all down. I think we lost this paper, but whatever, it's ingrained in my mind. So then he's like, okay, ask Jesus why you want to be a boy. And I was like, this is ridiculous. These thoughts are not from God. Like, these are weird. They're truth. Like, I hate pink. And guys have it better, I mean, so anyways, in some ways, okay. So then I'm still kneeling there, and he says, ask God why you want to be a boy. Okay, so there's times, like, okay, I told you that I'm not like an emotional person. I didn't like to be emotional, but like God will just kind of like point to the heart of everything, and you can't help but cry. I cry all the time. Like, I'm pretty close to tears right now. But it's also because I'm in front of all of you, and it's kind of uncomfortable. But anyways, so I prayed. I was like, God, why do I want to be a boy? And I'm not even kidding you. Like, in my mind, as I was praying, I had this like little movie clip. It was like a home video of myself as a little kid. And I'm watching, and I just started crying.